Time for another update. I just finished cleaning up the layout room because I have some visitors coming over to see the layout. And anytime the layout's clean, it's a good time to do an update. As you can see, we're up here in Clifftop, and one of the big changes has been the installation of the trackside scenery backdrop. Having this backdrop in here now will allow me to start doing some actual scenery in this area. And I'm going to start right here at the strip tipple and work my way from here all the way over to this switch here. I want to do this scene because I need it for a photograph for an article that I'm going to be working on, and I just thought this would be a good place to start. The backdrop has made a dramatic difference in this area. I just really like these backdrops. I chose the backdrop here without the mountain in the back. They offer this same one. It's called a Valley Flat series. They offer it with or without the mountain in the back. And if you've been to Clifftop, it doesn't really have a mountain in the back. It's kind of at the top of the mountain. That's why it's called Clifftop. And so I eliminated I ordered the version without the mountain. The hard part about that is most of my backdrops, I trim away the sky because I find it's easier to fit the backdrop in without having to worry about if the sky is going to reach the very top of the backdrop and also extend far enough to the bottom. But having a backdrop that has the trees that are like this here, it would be almost impossible to trim around those and not have that color there not exactly match that colors. So I went with the sky backdrop, and as you can see, it does go all the way up to the top. But I like the look of this here. At first I was kind of questioning the clouds, but the clouds really bring a realism to it that I couldn't paint those clouds like that. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. It really changes the entire scene in here. You'll also notice a couple other changes in here. Mainly the skirting has been applied all the way around in Clifftop. Another big change for this area. It really changes the feeling in here. Big thanks to my mom for making all these. Another thing I changed here in Clifftop was I 3D printed a plate for on top of here to eliminate the monitor screen that was here. And I added some lights in the tipple now. And I also added a power switch here so I can turn the tipple off when we're not operating or loading cars here. I wanted to have a switch to turn that off because I didn't want any accidental bumping or moving of switches when there's nothing in there, because it can cause quite a mess. So now when an operator comes up here, they can just flip the tipple power on, load, and then turn it off. There's this switch in here temporarily labeled proto lights. And what that does is it turns on these little lights right here. There's a whole string of them underneath there. However, those aren't very bright. They don't do much of anything when the layout lights are at full brightness. So one of the other things I did to help in loading cars here is I added this set of lights called bright lights. And you can see that they light up more of the interior, which really helps to see, even in this relatively bright layout room, having those on versus having those off makes a huge difference. So I'm happy with that addition. What those really are is those are just strips of the LEDs that I use to light the room itself. And they're just placed up in between, I don't know if I can get down low enough, but they're placed up underneath the roof rafters and just hooked up to the 12 volts that all the other LEDs are hooked up to. Now eventually I'm going to come back and actually make nice panels for these. I just didn't want to do it until I was totally convinced at how I wanted this to be laid out. And I'm not even 100% convinced I'm going to keep these like this. So we'll see how it goes for a little while. When that gets more settled, then I'll redo these to have nicer plates on them. Right now they're just quick 3D printed plates, and you can see this one even has some white filament stuck in here from me printing something in white. Now Landisburg also has a few changes. As you can see, the skirt is also in place up here. Now this skirt might need to come back out of here to be modified because it doesn't go quite as far to the edge of the platform. You can see kind of the edge of it over here. And so I'm going to move it out, but to do that I'm going to have to make some notches around the bottom of these boxes so that it can come forward. Right now it runs behind those boxes. You'll see that the light leak underneath here won't be there forever. What that is that's light actually shining down through the scenery that doesn't exist in Clifftop, and that's the lights from its backdrop shining at an angle down and than hitting the floor down here. So once the scenery is in Clifftop, you won't see that lighted area down there anymore. The other major thing that's happening here at Landisburg is that the Tipple chute has been installed and the conveyor belt has been installed and is operating. You can see some temporary wires run up here for me to test it. And it took some tweaking. What I thought was going to work didn't work. And so you can see those wood strips that are up there in that bin. I had the opening to the bin way too big, and what was happening is coal was going underneath the edges and getting wedged in between the conveyor belt and the bottom of the hoppers. So I had to put some styrene in there to bring the sides of the slope chute down to make the opening in there a little narrower. And to do that, I had to raise up the bin a little bit. I'm also working right now on finishing the structure that goes around this thing, and I'll show you those in a minute here. But I've been playing around with this chute in here because what I thought was going to be just an easy little chute has not been easy at all. What happens is the coal comes out of that chute pretty fast, and it just happens to hit inside of the hopper cars. It comes down and it hits the, let's see if I can get my finger in here. It comes down and it hits this sheet square into it, and the coal will bounce. I've extended the chute so that it comes more into this pocket here, but eventually it'll still build up and hit right here. And I've tried a couple different things, and what I ended up doing was I put a couple boards in there. You can see right there and right there, and they help to kind of contain the bouncing coal a little bit. You can see some of the coal that was spilled there from earlier bouncing around. I did actually vacuum it up out here, but I'm still tuning that a little bit. It's getting better every time I kind of tweak it a little bit more. I like the kind of randomness of that in there. It reminds me of some old wood tipples where they pretty much just nailed anything up to make it work. And so I'm not really opposed to having it look like that in there. But I still have some tuning to do on it, but it's getting closer and closer each time. Now this tipple does not load a lot of cars. You know, it's like a 5-car per session. So even if there's a little bit of coal spilled, if I vacuum up between sessions or vacuum up once a month, it won't be a big deal. To operate this tipple now, it uses just a push button on the fascia that I haven't labeled it yet, but right here. And what it does is it turns on that little belt. Now that belt there is made out of a piece of elastic band, and I got that idea from David Stewart, who makes his conveyor belts that way. So there's a drum on the end of the conveyor belt that is wrapped in sandpaper, and then that's just elastic waistband that's sewed that the ends are sewed together on. Now I was planning on using a different motor on this, and that motor was not good enough to use, so I had this little coreless motor here left over from a project that you can see I've adapted it to my 3D print. And you can also see that I've glued in some styrene kind of wedges on the side of the conveyor to help force the band here into kind of a V shape. And it took me a couple tries to figure out how long they really needed to be. I also had to tune the opening up here to make the pile a little smaller so that it comes out and it just keeps it all in the middle of the belt there. And it actually works really good. I'll back a train under here and we'll show you how it loads. That little piece of cork that you see that's going down inside of the chute, I glued that in there. It's a piece of old roadbed cork because the sound of the coal falling onto the hopper bin was really just too annoying. I'm really not liking the sound of coal falling onto plastic sheets. So I glued that piece of cork in there, and it's really muted that sound down a lot. You still hear the coal hitting in the hopper cars, and it doesn't sound like big heavy coal or rocks. It sounds like little teeny, pellets of plastic hitting plastic. Another addition to the layout is that I've purchased 2 more UWT-50Ps. I decided to go with these as the standard throttle to have on the layout. I still have my UWT-100 that I use for myself, or if anybody really wants to use that one. But I thought it'd be nice just to have a standard throttle that everyone is the same and everybody will understand it. And then I can do a orientation on how to use the throttle for those that don't. I find that for just switching, this is a really nice throttle. It really helps to have the knob for Shays more than the scroll button, because many times we're operating full speed, and so you're going to want to be able to run this all the way over. When I switch, I run it about halfway, but it's really nice to be able to throw this over and then throw it off and have the momentum keep going, and then using the brakes on here. I wish that they had a better way to access brake buttons on here. It does have these little buttons on the side. They're a multi-function button. They push in or roll up and down. And I have tried to do those for the brakes, but the way my fingers kind of work is I unfortunately push the button in and then pull it down, and it operates too many different functions. As I'm saying that now, I suppose I could unprogram that push in to be something that doesn't do anything. But for now, I'm just using the F7, which is pretty convenient still. You can do it single-handed, and it's not hard to find F7 to hit the brakes. I find that most people are not going to want to probably use the brakes. They just want to use it normal, and that's where the P, so that means this is a potentiometer. It's not an encoder, so it has a definite stop and a definite end to it. And it just seems like that's such a common thing for operators to just have that. It feels very natural to have a throttle like this. Here at the switchback, you can see I painted the foam that was on the edge here. I get tired of seeing that pink foam everywhere, so I decided to just quickly throw some tan latex paint on here. Now this will get all covered up, but honestly, I'm not going to have finished scenery for several years, so I think I'm going to go through and paint even the plaster everywhere this tan color. It's easier on the eyes, and it just looks more natural in here to see the black and the tan and not the white and the pink and the blue that seems to be everywhere around here. Another addition I did over here is to add a safety pin right here. You can see I'm using a tortoise switch machine, and I showed, I think in the last video, the limit switch that I had put in the gate here. But now when we lower the gate, of course that pin retracts, and when you raise the gate, that pin will stick up, and hopefully that'll be enough to prevent any runoffs. Now, would it break something on the pilot? Maybe, but a pilot is a small thing to fix versus an entire locomotive, plummeting down off the edge here and onto the floor. I did finish all the car inspector circuits. You can see the one here at the dump trestle, and then there's one here at the switchback. There's also one up at Mine 7, and there's one over in Landisburg now. All those are installed and functioning. I really want to thank Bob Sobel for his help on all that. Those have been a fun addition. I did go through the cards and have cards at every one of the locations here. So since the last update, I also built a few pieces of rolling stock. One of them you can see here is this idler car. Now this car is used to pull standard gauge cars out of the interchange. And you can see on this end, it has a standard gauge coupler. That's a KD coupler on this end. And then on this other end, there's another KD coupler that's a narrow gauge. This end, I built this on a log car, one of my resin printed log cars. And I built this end to kind of look like a Shay pilot. Eventually I'm going to put footboards and railing on there and some pull pockets. But for now, I just wanted to get it in service and kind of start working on that operation of moving standard gauge cars from the interchange track over into the transfer yard. And I wanted to see how this thing would work out. So what I did to make this car is I just threw down some wood and kind of freelanced this thing as I went along. You can see there's a heavy plank offset to help support the standard gauge coupler, and then just some side planks so I could put some decking on here. I decided to make the decking really wore out. It's got mold and plants growing out of the wood that's rotting. There's a hole. It's a little bit maybe over the top, but I kind of like the look of it here. Eventually I'll end up throwing a bunch of stuff on the deck like chains and re-railers and some wood they can use to re-rail cars that derail. Another car I finished here is another caboose. Now that we're going to have some trains running with multiple people, I needed to get a couple more cabooses built. This one here, I actually had started at the previous house when I was freelancing, and it's based off of some text in the Mans Creek book of some other cabooses I had. There were no pictures of it, so I just assumed it was built a lot like the other coal train caboose. This one here has one window where you can see with broken glass in it. It has, it's also a little shorter, but I built this with a little bit of a sag into it. You can see the roof has a sag kind of down and the car has a sag in the middle. I did that by building the frame, and then I kind of wetted the frame and clamped it into a fixture for a while until the wood all dried out and it maintained the curve. And then all the other pieces were just built on top of that curve. Now, I don't know what the inside of this caboose really looked like, but I had some fun just working out and adding a whole bunch of interior detail parts to it that I had laying around. Kind of made a workbench and a first aid cabinet and just put a whole bunch of junk in there. There's a guy making coffee on a stove there, and he's got a flannel shirt on, which probably doesn't fit the West Virginia summer, but it fits the look of the whole thing. I do have to change the brake wheel on the end. I ran the brake staff through the end beam, but it was in line with the handrails, and that didn't work out, so I designed some parts to have the ratchet and pawl overhang the end, and I 3D printed those. I just haven't gotten around to getting those on yet. For the third caboose, I built it to look more like a passenger car. Now, early on, the Mans Creek did have a coach, and then they had a second coach. Now, the second coach just had a round roof like this, and there is one really kind of grainy picture of it sitting on the summit trestle. But I decided to just build this again, mostly freelance. It's actually built on the frame of a Rio Grande short caboose that I started building. And then when I decided to go prototype Mans Creek, I had no need for that car and I wasn't going to do anything with it. But to quickly get another caboose in operation, I just grabbed that frame, added the 3 windows, and built a roof for it that was just a flat curved roof. Now this car unrealistically has air brakes underneath it, but I'm just kind of overlooking that for now because it gets it in service. This car was painted and weathered with a bunch of AK wood weathering or wood painting kits, the same one I used for painting the log cars. All the colors on this car happen to be from set number 1, which is called the warm wood set. And then I did a little bit more chipping on there with their wood chipping pencil sets. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that. The decals I designed to look like the original coach lettering because I just thought it was kind of a neat addition. And so this car is actually all wood. The windows are Grant Line parts from the Rio Grande short caboose, but the railings are all brass, and the roof is actually wood that I, again, wetted and curved it around a form, and when it dried out, it held that curve. It does have an interior in it, so I did start to kind of do a little interior on it. Again, there's not really a prototype for this car, but I just figured that I'd put some benches in there for some passengers to sit on, and then because I'm going to use it for caboose, I put this little cabinet and a little desk right there. Probably not anything close to what the Mans Creek would have. Probably way too elaborate. Over here, there's just another little coal stove in the corner. I haven't got the chimney on it yet. But I just wanted to have something in there. Eventually, I'll probably put some people in there, but it was just kind of a throw together from what I had just to get something done and move on. You can see the bottom here did have the full underbody treatment from when it was going to be a short caboose. So as you can see here, the printer is making the walls for the Landisburg Tipple. I use my FDM printer for making these walls. They're really just a sub wall that'll eventually be covered with wood material. Here you can see the roof, and the roof has a framework in it to hold it in shape. And here's some of the walls I'd already done. So let's take a moment here at the workbench, which is a little bit of a mess because I've been working through the coal tipple and the coupler boxes, and then I'm working on a painting project for a friend with some HO box cars, which is why I have maroon and yellow paint all over my fingers. But I want to talk about the Shays and some of the things I've been working on. Now, a while ago, I had mentioned to a machinist about a project I was working on about building Shays, and this machinist had a CNC lathe, and they offered to make me a sample of some Shay tires. I sent them an STL file that I designed of the Shay wheel, or the wheel tread I wanted to use, and all the dimensions of this tire, and they just stuck that in their CNC lathe and made me a bunch of stainless steel tires. And it was funny because I thought that for some reason in my head, I didn't tell him amount. I thought I'd be getting about a dozen of them, and he made me an entire bag of these things. But these are pretty neat. I actually posted a video on Facebook of that machine cutting these things and how fast it can make one of these. So then I decided that I would design my own wheels. Now, up to this point, I've been using precision scale centers, which were actually the old Chemtron centers. But for a few reasons that I don't want to really go into, I wanted to use my own and make some minor changes to them. So I designed the gear on here, and I also designed the little bevel gear, which is, you can see on this truck I've been working on here. There's a difference in this small bevel gear compared to the original Chemtron one. I actually used the geometry for gears to make these gears. I know that sounds kind of strange, but the Chemtron gears is not that much of a gear. It's got the pitches correct, but the shape of the teeth is a little bit different. And they use the same gear for both their drive gear on the axle, and they also use it on the Chemtron truck. But you can see the difference in the gear here compared to mine is mine's longer. It's actually more of a bevel gear. I've designed it using the math of a bevel gear, and I 3D printed this test set, and I don't know if you can see it. It's probably hard to see, but the mesh I have is a lot better and more consistent. And it just goes to the fact that you're talking about someone who has a computer and has programs that design all this stuff, and it prints it out perfectly compared to someone who did this by hand and made it. I'm not saying that this is bad. It's actually incredible for what they had to work with at the time. But now that I can leverage newer technology, I can make those parts better. And this mesh is a lot easier for me to get and maintain. These are quite a bit of a struggle. Anybody who's ever made that Chemtron Shay or precision scale Shay knows that getting all this to mesh is one of the hardest things. Trying to get the binds out and trying to get them not to be too loose. And mine now are really consistent. And so what I did is I'm testing these 3D printed parts here. And I'm going to run this thing. I accidentally bent the axle for the drive one when I was trying to press on the gears, so I have to make another one. I'm making them out of brass for me. There's one sitting right here, and the brass is just obviously not the way to go, but it's the quickest way for me to work on these things. This will eventually be the axle for the rear driven gear. But I'm going to test these 3D printed. I don't expect them to hold up, but I got to know. I think it'd be kind of fun to think that everything on this Shay has surprised me up to this point. The whole drive line is 3D printed, and it lasts just fine. So, maybe some strange, weird reason these gears will last. The resin I'm using on here is called RPG. It's by Frozen, and it has a different feel to it. It's not like other resins that's brittle. It has a softer, almost styrene-ish like quality to it, and so maybe it will last. I don't know. I am going to coat it with some of this Neo lube, like I do a lot of my drive parts, so it will have a more black finish to it. And this is just basic graphite that's suspended in alcohol, so when it dries on there, it has alcohol film on there. So, we'll see what that does. But really, the goal of me making this is that I have a set of test castings being made. So I have some investment cast nickel centers. Now for the passive side, I've decided I'm going to continue to use this RPG resin because there's really no stress on this. And that stuff's really strong. You can see the spokes are really thick. I don't think there's going to be any problem using a 3D printed center on this side. And what's nice about that is it eliminates me having to worry about insulating the wheels from the axle. This one will be nickel and this will be stainless steel, so this axle will be conductive to this side, but it will no longer be conductive to the brass wheel center on this side. So I think that's going to be a huge advantage to these wheels here. Plus, they're printing fine and they're round and I don't see any problem with them. So we're going to see how this is going to go. This is something I've been working on for almost a year now. and I'll let you guys know how all this ended up working out. But I'm going to be building a test Shay, kind of a fictional Shay here that I've been working on. It's really just it's kind of dusty here because it's been sitting off to the side, but what it really is, it's the Mans Creek Shay with the shorter tender that would have been more standard. And I also decided to use the high back tender that the Wilderness Shay had. So it will not only be a shorter looking Shay, but I think it'll be a really bulky looking Shay with this high back tender. The normal tender that the Mans Creek had was down here, about 2 feet lower. And of course the Mans Creek tender was 4 feet longer, but this is what I'd call standard Shay length for a 42-ton Shay. So this is going to be my test Shay for the new drive, and what it'll end up being is it'll be one of the Shays that I'm going to keep around as a spare. One of the things I'm kind of worried about it with only 3 Shays and 3 operators, if anything were to happen to one Shay, that operator would be done for the session. So I'm going to build some spares. I know that sounds kind of strange, but I've got this one here and I've got another one that I'm working on that will be kind of backup locomotives. They're not going to be quite as detailed, so I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time working on fine details. Matter of fact, when I printed this, I actually beefed up some of the things. That the cab's slightly thicker, the window frames are slightly thicker, the top of the tender is slightly thicker. So these can handle a lot more, actual handling. I'm not going to put all the little fragile hooks down the side that that get broken off when I try to pick up the locomotive on the sides here. The pilots won't have 50 countersunk countersunk holes drilled into real wood. They're going to have a 3D printed pilot. I'm still going to weather them and paint them to be nice. They'll be like the log cars. They'll be, from a glance, it'll look like a really nice Shay, but in a close-up photo, you'll see some of the lacking details on it probably. But I don't know. I say that now, but I know how I am when I get into these things. So anyways, thanks for watching this update. And the next update will probably be what the operating session was like.